Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Larry DeShera, and today I want to talk with you about ethical and professional behavior for educators. Now, before I do that, I want to give you just a little bit of background. I was a teacher, a special education teacher for 10 years, and I was an elementary principal for a couple of years, and later became a special education coordinator for a school district. Held several positions in an administrative capacity at the central office level, and then later became a school superintendent for approximately 10 years. I later was hired to take over a school district that was struggling and had been intervened by the State Department of Education, and spent about 2 years doing that. So over the years, I've dealt with an awful lot of things that involve teacher and administrative behavior that was very good in some respects, but also not very good in other respects. So I hope I can bring a little bit of experience and some stories, to the table that will allow you to make good decisions when you're out there having to make these kinds of decisions, and do so in a way that benefits kids and also will benefit you as a professional. Now, our audience, the targeted audience, is going to be anybody that's in schools, whether it's staff, whether it's teachers, counselors, assistant principals, principals, or central office administrators that may be in the audience, because we all have to make decisions, and we hope we do it in an ethical and professional manner. What I'm hoping to do today is expose you to some of the areas that seem to be the most problematic, or perhaps the ones that seem to be in the news the most recently. So we're going to jump right in there, and I'm just going to kind of go over some of the concepts and give a few examples, and that's how we'll move through the slide. Um, First of all, we got to look back. Ethical behavior in education, as well as in all aspects of numerous professions, concern about it didn't just start today here in the 21st century. I mean, if you go all the way back to Plato and Aristotle and others, they actually chronicled and talked about ethical dilemmas that leaders face, and their ideas on how people should act and how they should do their jobs and how people should be treated. Today, it seems like that there's a spotlight on it even more, because back in many years ago, you didn't have electronic media, and you didn't have ways of information spreading quickly, and there just doesn't seem to be the temptation that was there many years ago. Today, however, I mean, that's where the temptation and that's where the problems seem to be exacerbated. And so we need to take a look at it. Also, there's been a lot of court cases since then that have dealt with issues, and I've always said I don't think there's a whole lot of issues that I could be faced with that I haven't seen before. But I tell you, I get surprised every day because another one pops up, and I just shake my head and just say, this is a new one to me. But the basic premise is still the same. You're still trying to do the right things for the right reasons. There's been a lot of laws, a lot of pertinent laws to you and your job responsibilities. There's been guidance that's been put out there, certain codes of conduct for principals, for teachers, for superintendents, even for school board members. It's important that you familiarize yourself with those pertinent laws, because they are the difference between you keeping your job and losing your job. They can be the difference between you staying in or out of jail. And so I think it's important that we all take a look at those and talk about some of the ramifications if we violate some of those codes or some of those laws. There's a lot of situations out there that can get us in trouble, and what I wanted to do today was just talk about a couple of those. First of all, when we're dealing with students, you have to be so careful, and I'm the first to admit that when I was growing up in the education world, I was naive and I was immature, and I broke a lot of the rules because I just simply didn't know any better. And it was also one of those things where you just assume that nothing's going to happen to me. So, if I want to take a group of kids to a ball game and throw them in my car and we take off, I didn't think about the liability risk. I didn't think about, what happens if I'm dropping all the kids off and the last remaining student in my car is a high school female. and how that put me in a risky situation. I was just young and naive and immature. So if I can help get that across to any young teacher out there, that you especially have to be extra careful. I was fortunate that I had mentors along the way that would kind of warn me and kind of point out risky behavior that I was just naive and not even thinking about. I can't tell you how many times after a basketball game I would take students home, and I'd have 6 or 7 kids piled in my car to give them rides home, and didn't even think twice about if there was a female in the car last when I was dropping them off and putting me in a compromising situation. But I remedied that as soon as it was pointed out to me, and I took the steps to make sure that I didn't put myself in those vulnerable situations. Right now, there's electronic communications that students have by cell phone, iPads, notebooks, and once they're out there on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, there's so many of them out there. I always caution teachers and administrators, don't go anywhere near it. Wait until you retire before you get out there on Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and other places, because these kids are out there, and if they friend you or you friend them, and then some accusation takes place, you don't have a lot of defense, and so you just got to be extra careful with it. And I tell people, stay away from it if possible, you educators, at least until after you have retired as an educator. I mentioned earlier about transporting students. It is truly a liability risk, because they're supposed to only be transported on school buses that have insurance, where people have had training and so forth. But we've all done it, and we I'm sure we still continue to do that. I remember we had a kid that was going, he qualified for a state golf tournament. He was by himself, and we had to send that kid on a school bus with a coach by themselves, an entire school bus, in order to transport the kid in a way that we felt like reduced our liability risk. I thought there was something wrong with that, and I later, as a superintendent, would allow that coach to transport that kid. But boy, we got permission from the parents. We made sure they had insurance. And even though we did all those things, I think an attorney would still tell you that we still set ourselves up for liability risk and probably shouldn't have done it. It was just a risk that I just decided to take as a superintendent. When it comes to contact with students, we all have a tendency to want to put our arms around them, want to pat them on the back, do all those things. And I would just say you can't do that. You've got to be extra careful. Sometimes we horseplay with the kids. Sometimes we get in trouble when we use corporal punishment. And obviously, if we have sexual contact with students, we're simply asking for trouble. Non-contact with students. Sometimes we flirt. Sometimes we pass notes. Sometimes we do sexting and other things that will get us in trouble. We didn't touch the student, but it'll certainly get us in trouble. Obviously, there are lots of situations that you've got to be leery of. Sometimes as adults, we get involved in couple swaps, and we're on Facebook and swinging sites, and I would just say, shy away from that. Sometimes we like to gamble. I don't see anything wrong with if somebody wants to gamble, but I certainly wouldn't put it out there on social media. If you get arrested for DUI and under the influence and going to parties that are crazy, and that information's out there, it hurts you as a professional. And certainly, we have ethical dilemmas when it comes to teacher-student relationships, even teacher-on-teacher relationships. And certainly it's a problem when there's an administrator-teacher relationship or administrator and staff relationship. I've seen a lot of people lose their jobs over that, and I would caution you to stay away from it. There's also things that are going to take place out in the community when you're out there clubbing it up and enjoying parties. That goes with you. That reputation follows you around, and that's going to hurt you as a professional. Not keeping student information confidential when you're at the hair salon and you're sharing stuff that happened between students at a school, whether it's a behavioral issue or whatever. You shouldn't be sharing it out there in the community, whether you're at a luncheon with some friends, or even sharing information at school about a child's test scores, or information that really is no one else's business. It's important that you protect that privacy and that confidentiality. And certainly, I've seen where teachers have used their position for personal gain. You cannot tutor students that you yourself failed to teach them. If you failed to teach them the math concepts, you then can't turn around and charge their parents to tutor them after school. You can do it for free, but you can't charge them. You certainly can't use that captive audience to sell products to students and or their parents. I've dealt with it. It's a no-no. Um, I've seen emotional bullying take place where coaches and other adults hurl personal insults at kids. Sometimes they call them dumb. Sometimes they tell them they're going to be a failure in life. Sometimes they tell them they're fat. I've seen PE coaches get on to kids who are overweight. Sometimes I've heard of situations where adults have said negative things about parents or kids on Facebook or on Instagram and other places, or even just through texting. You can't do that. You've got to be careful not to do that. I've also seen adults physically bully kids. It happens primarily in elementary schools where they manhandle them, they grab them, they squeeze their arm or whatever. There's also YouTube videos and stuff that spotlight this that I've put here that if you'd like to go to and see examples of that, I would encourage you to do so. There's things called educational malpractice and negligence that are common terms that are starting to become even more common. And examples of educational malpractice is when you have an illiterate graduate. Who do you blame? Sometimes they want to blame you, the teachers and administrators. And sometimes you have kids that pass all 4 years of high school math but can't pass an exit exam or a graduation exam. And then sometimes you'll get accused of educational malpractice if a special needs student does not get the education that the parents and others think they deserve. There's also examples of neglect where you leave your students unattended when they're in the classroom. If something happens, you're going to be responsible. If you leave them unattended on the playground, somebody gets hurt on the monkey bars, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to have to answer some questions. Also, if you neglect to deal with some serious issues such as bullying or accusations of inappropriate conduct between students and teachers, and you fail to act, that's a type of neglect, and you just set yourself up for trouble. You know, we have to ask ourselves, who are we responsible to professionally? Are we responsible to ourselves? Of course we are. We have to live with ourselves. We're also responsible to our students. You hold their future in your hand. I personally am responsible to my family. They're dependent on me to provide for them, and I don't want to let them down. I also don't want to let my parents down. They don't deserve to be shamed because of some actions I've taken that I knew better. I also have a responsibility to my profession. Educators depend on each other. We can't embarrass our profession and compromise it. And finally, I personally have a responsibility to my God. And if you're a believer, you certainly do too. And we don't want to do anything that's not pleasing in that regard as well. Um, you know, we've got to ask some questions, and I'll take those questions right now about what code of behavior are you violating? What might the consequences be for you? How's the student impacted by your actions? What are possible causes of administrator or teacher unethical or unprofessional behavior? And what are some more appropriate ways to respond or interact? We'll have time to take those questions, and I'll see if I can answer some of those for you. I just wanted to show you there are a few references that I pulled from. The Association of American Educators has a code of ethics for educators that I thought was excellent, and there's the website. Also, I pulled from the 8 principles of ethical leadership in education and what principals need to know about ethics. They're all quality products that are out there. They're all, there's a whole bunch of them. There's thousands of them. I just wanted to list 3 of them here today and point you to that YouTube video that we did, and hopefully you as an educator and professional at the end of the day will do the things that are best for kids, and you've got to do it in a mature and a professional manner. And if you do those things, you're going to be fine and you will be protected. Good luck, and call me if you ever need me. Thank you.